Hi, this is Sonic Prism podcast where we explore what drives people to create music. My name is Mira Gordi, and together with Joe Santa Maria, we will learn to understand, feel, and speak the language of notes with you. With today's episode, we are launching a series of heartfelt conversations about music, and of course, that's quite exciting. That was one of the reasons why we decided to start with a topic that felt comfortable for both of us to discuss. That topic is Joe's latest music album, Echo Deep, which he spent 10 years creating. In addition to being my co-host, Joe is first and foremost a talented composer, saxophonist, and jazz musician. Joe's music is a journey into the inner world. It's something that makes you confront your thoughts and feelings, whether you're experiencing the most beautiful or perhaps the most chaotic moments of your life. His music teaches you to see beauty in all aspects of the world and maybe even find a touch of humor in the sad moments. Isn't that what true art is? The kind we all so desperately need. To slow down, close your eyes, and allow your imagination to create. Get comfortable. We are starting. Hi Joe, I'm so happy to see you and to share this first music podcast with you. I was thrilled to recently listen to your album Echo Deep on YouTube, and I want to thank you once again for the privilege of enjoying such unique art.
Hi Mira, thanks so much for inviting me to this podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
You know, for me, things like this are truly valuable because this kind of music isn't something you just put on while doing chores. Also, why not if you want to vacuum like you are in an art house film scene? It's something that you feel, something that makes you listen to yourself in a special way. When listening to music like this, everything around you starts to feel special too. Personally, it gives me the image of pouring a glass of whiskey, sinking into a chair, maybe closing my eyes, and diving into how my emotions respond to the sound. And you know what I find unique about this album? It doesn't create artificial spikes of joy, the kinds that keep you in a state of plastic happiness. You know what I mean? This music, as I perceive it, gently yet confidently makes you face real emotions. At certain moments, listening to this album brings back life experiences that weren't necessarily pleasant, but they are yours. And as you continue listening, reliving these experiences through the music, you reach a kind of grand happiness, almost euphoria, from exploring your own emotions. And then develop the thought that the magic of music is always close. You just have to shift your attention to it. Anyway, that's how I felt about this album. And I would love to hear from you to understand what you put into it as its creator. You mentioned that you worked on this album for 10 years, which already tells me that it wasn't a commercial project, but something you truly lived through and wanted to share sincerely. Were there any significant moments during this 10-year journey that inspired you to create this album? Please share, Joe.
First of all, thank you so much for making time to have this conversation with me. I do feel very emotionally connected to this record, of course because I lived with it for almost a third of my life, but also because over the 10 years that I worked on it, I went through so much. I started work on this project near the end of my 20s. I had graduated previously from Berklee College of Music and had finished my graduate studies at CalArts. Those two experiences alone had a huge impact on my musical influences and also on my personal life. Ever since high school, I've been a lover and practitioner of jazz music, primarily as a saxophonist and composer. I have played in rock bands and classical ensembles throughout my entire time as a musician. I have a deep appreciation for all forms of music and creative outlets. Visual art, electronic music, cinema, animation, theater, and even occasionally dance and literature have played a role in my views of art making and what it means to offer something unique to the public. I also grew up in a creative household. Both of my parents are visual artists, and I spent a lot of time as a young person painting, building models, and admiring my parents and their creative friends. I also had a lot of creative friends early in life. I was always drawn to other kids who made things. I collaborated with friends on a zine in elementary school and spent time in life drawing and computer literacy classes when I was very young, even before I tried playing a musical instrument for the first time. To get back to the point of your question, though, I think that although I spent 10 years on this particular album, I feel it is reflective of my entire life of art making, both as a musician and as an observer of art and culture. Each song represents a very clear visual and emotional moment to me. Some are more specific to a certain time or event, but mostly they encompass feelings that have grown over time and even dreams. I would say that each composition represents a part of my personality. Moments I felt peaceful, challenged, times of good nature and humor, and even times when I felt a sense of self-knowing and purpose.
In this case, you could even say that this album goes beyond the 10-year period of your life, right? It seems to reflect more of the quintessence of lived experience and a reflection of the overall beauty of life, culture, and nature. After all, one of the first tracks is Soapbox, which you mentioned was a reflection on memories of your childhood spent in nature in Michigan. Did that period and what you absorbed at that age influence your development as a musician?
That's exactly right. I feel that this album represents me as a whole. I'm very happy to have finished it as well because I feel that now I can look into the future and start creating new feelings and new ideas. It was difficult for me to let this project go and to start to focus on new compositions. Now it's done. The composition Soapbox has a lot of meaning to me. The title itself represents a colloquial phrase familiar to most people. When you have something to say to a group, you stand up on a soapbox and shout it out over the heads of the crowd. I like the juxtaposition of this title, which is usually used in a political context, with this simple and beautiful composition. In fact, the working title for this piece was Beauty First, which I came up with to represent my feelings that art, at least in my view, needs to be beautiful in some way. It can be dark, mysterious, challenging, and any number of things, but as long as it is beautiful in nature, it will draw people in and they'll be able to digest the deeper meaning. This is one of my favorites and one of my most pastoral compositions to date. It does bring me back to a feeling of growing up in Michigan, where I lived until I was about 12 years old. It was so beautiful there during the change of seasons. The fall and spring especially had a special feeling. The forest, lakes, and overall feeling of the environment was very clean and crisp. My family and I would visit the Great Lakes in the summer and swim in the cold water and walk along the beach, which seemed to grow right out of the forest. It was an idyllic time. I also had a lot of freedom as a kid growing up there. It was very safe, and my friends and I would ride bikes and skateboards around the town as far as we wanted to go. There was never any fear of something happening. It was a lot of fun, and this song brings me back to the cabin in the woods we visited while I was a child. Family dinners, friends and their parents laughing and sharing stories. All of those pleasant childhood moments.
Wow. While you were speaking, I remembered my childhood feelings of freedom and safety, when you're riding a bike and just enjoying life. Isn't joy found in moments like this? It's wonderful to dive back into those memories once again while listening to music. I think after your story, many people will be able to, unlock such childhood memories, which is wonderful. But you still decided to open the album with Apex Group. This track relates to your high school years when you were starting your journey as a musician. What kind of music did you enjoy during that time?
Yeah, so Apex Groove is an entirely different animal of a piece. Although the theme of this record is repetition and simplicity, I think that Apex Groove uses the incredible drum work as a way to create excitement, and the layering of the brass instruments and saxophones give it tension and release. It rises and falls while also maintaining a sense of power and driving forward. During high school, I was so inspired and I was working so hard to become a musician. It wasn't easy. I was talented, but not as much or in the same way as some of my peers. I felt I was always just behind, but I was so determined. I think the feeling of this song is that feeling of gaining traction, when you know you can achieve something and your hard work is just starting to pay off. By the time I was exiting high school, I had accomplished a lot. I always felt that I was behind, but when I look back, I was actually doing really well. There were a lot of talented people in my program, and I just spent too much time comparing myself with them. Now that I've been playing for so long and have done so much interesting professional work, I realized that I had special talent all along, but when you're concentrating so deeply on your progress, you don't recognize your own special qualities. I'm so thankful for the challenges now, and I feel I've benefited so much from that time. As far as influences for this style of composition, at the time I was listening to a wide variety of music. I loved jazz, and I spent a lot of time listening to saxophonists. I loved John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, and Sonny Stitt, to name a few. I had a great Pharoah Sanders record. I had no idea who he was really at the time, but his sound spoke to me. I loved Sonny Rollins. All of these people have very distinct styles, but what they share is that their music has a unique feeling. The feeling of forward motion, surprise, and excitement. Even the ballads have a beautiful feeling of excitement. It's hard to describe, but one of the beautiful things about jazz masters is you don't know exactly what they'll do next, but once they do it, you think, I would have never expected that. They're unpredictable, and at the same time, their music has a beautiful logic. It's incredible to me. I also played in lots of large ensembles at the time. I played in a saxophone quartet, several jazz big bands in my school and in my hometown of Houston. I also played in a classical wind ensemble. All of these orchestral experiences influenced me. I love big band jazz. I think that brass and wind ensembles can create some of the most powerful and romantic music. I've always loved listening to Duke Ellington, Charles Mingus, Count Basie, Thad Jones, and other classic ensembles. The title itself is a riff on Aphex Group, named for Aphex Twin. I loved listening to Richard D. James and Melodies from Mars during high school. I had some really cool friends who were not into jazz at all. They turned me on to lots of rock, punk, and electronic music. Aphex Twin continues to be one of my favorite musical artists of all time, such deep, interesting, and humorous music.
It's so interesting to hear about your journey of discovering the world of music. I'm really impressed by your dedication to your craft at such a young age. When I was in high school, I was still contemplating what I wanted to become. And in the end, it took me a few more years to figure it out. It turns out that your family of artists, the creative environment, and the tranquility and beauty of Michigan's nature were, in a way, the cradle for the development of your talent. And most importantly, they gave you the confidence in your choice and the strength to keep moving forward, which isn't so easy in youth. There are so many distractions. Your album also includes the track Lullaby, which you yourself described as a picture of a plane over the water, and an endless soft sunset and a tired moment on a journey. Is this about that thrilling moment when you're flying to visit a new country, filled with pleasant excitement, or when you're already flying back home, inspired and full of impressions from a new place?
So Lullaby is another beautiful one. I think it's a cousin to Soapbox. The song represents a slightly older character, someone who's traveling, who's open to new thoughts and feelings, someone who's watching time go by and is observing but still engaging. It sounds funny to me to admit, but one of the influences for this song was the underscore for a scene in the original Batman movie with Adam West. There's a scene that I remember where a helicopter is flying over the ocean, and there's this beautiful music in the background, flutes and strings and horns. Some sort of maybe 60s background band. I can only remember a small bit of the sound, but I remember seeing it as a kid before I ever dreamed of being a musician, and for some reason, that feeling stuck with me. This song definitely has a processional feeling. It's about somebody moving forward at a fast but not blistering pace. Fast enough that you can see most of what's around you, but maybe you're missing a few things. You're reflecting and experiencing at the same time. I was doing a lot of traveling after high school. I can imagine flying from Texas to Boston for the first time, or maybe my first trip to California, knowing I would find something exciting, but also not knowing anything about it really. I was excited to continue my musical education, and I had no idea what I was really getting into. Think about being a bird drifting over a forest and then a desert and then the ocean, changing scenes with good weather, and all the danger is down in the shadows out of sight.
Oh, those innocent moments when you're just starting your studies. Does the track On the Water have a similar story? It's very soothing.
Yes, if Soapbox and Lullaby are cousins, On the Water is Lullaby's older brother. It has a regal, processional feeling similar to several of these compositions, but it's more elaborate. I think of a distant planet, a planet filled with varied life, with water, big sky, several moons, something out of sci-fi. I think of elaborate colors. Maybe this is the wedding of two alien creatures or gods, a god of the sea and a god of the sky. The bass drives the composition with an upward modulation. The strings enter for a dramatic counter melody at the end of each chorus. The different horns create shifting counterpoints and melodies. It evolves over time and reaches a climax marked by a synthesizer and soprano saxophone melody. The cheerful and fun main section is cooled by the strings and soprano saxophone, like the wise older shaman predicting trouble ahead. Although there is conflict built into the progression, it always resolves back to the cheerful processional. It's supposed to give the effect and mood of perseverance.
Let's talk more about your travels. You mentioned that the inspiration for this album came not only from the cities where you lived, but also from your travels. You visited Indonesia, Mexico, and South America. For example, in Pathways 1, you can hear the influence of the Balinese flute. But in your interpretation, it sounds more European. Could you tell us more about how the idea came about to take Balinese music and play it in a more classical musical style?
Of course, when I was at CalArts, I became obsessed with Balinese gamelan. I performed in the ensemble there with some fantastic musicians and had a wonderful opportunity to visit Bali for a month with the group to learn a full Ramayana piece to perform when we returned to the States. It was a very special experience, completely magical. The way the culture views its music as a spiritual practice as well as entertainment was very powerful for me. We visited temples and spiritual events as well as local performances, and I heard some of the most interesting sounds of my life. Balinese music affected a lot of these compositions, actually. I was really enamored by the way that they build their structures, from the ground up. It was mind-blowing at the time. There were even children playing gamelan that I would hear practicing each morning near my small hotel. The random sounds of the children were dreamlike and hilarious early in the morning after hearing the organized perfection of the adult performers every evening and during the day. It was like a reset for the mind. I think I was closer to the children than the professionals as far as my ability to actually play the Balinese instruments, but it really influenced me and my whole compositional technique. The Balinese people have a version of gamelan that's for flutes only. It's a very interesting sound, and the way the harmony is built is that of a pyramid, so to speak. Low instruments on the bottom provide bass notes, and as the instruments get smaller, the interlocking patterns and harmony become more elaborate. Sometimes a lone flute will sing above the rest, offering an ornamental version of the main melody. It's trance-inducing. Although this served as the main influence for my flute choir pieces on the album, I don't claim that I wrote in that style. My harmonies and my general thought about the instruments definitely comes from an American or European background. This is my interpretation of a similar structure, building low to high. As well as the music of Bali, I did study some Central American and South American flute music. I haven't been able to experience as much of that in person, but I have listened to a lot of flute music from different regions. There was an amazing record I used to listen to called Flutes and Strings of the Andes that made a big impression on me. Also, when I was in New York, I played with a Colombian band that was really fantastic. Some of the Brazilian flute players are absolutely incredible as well. Pixinguinha is described as the Louis Armstrong of Brazil, and he can play the flute almost better than anyone I've ever heard. It's devastating, to be honest. He's so good. The amazing thing about flute is it's such a simple and ancient instrument. There is ancient and modern flute music from just about every region of the earth, even before modern instruments.
Interesting. In Pathways 2, we can barely hear Bali anymore. The music feels ascending with increasing density, and then it just cuts off abruptly. And it gave me a sense of the grandeur of late 17th century church music, as it began to transition into classical secular music.
So Pathways 2 is certainly European in influence. I actually took a short phrase from a Mozart piece and used it as the basis of the composition. I love the way the line ascends and descends, creating tension and release all by itself. I harmonized it, and I created my own melodies based on his original part. It was an experiment to see if I could take something which was just a small 1 or 2 bar phrase and transform it into something new. I used alto flute and some effects to create the overall atmosphere, and I used my friend's pump organ to provide a drone for the ensemble to rest on. This piece feels like a spiritual dirge to me. I would love to hear it performed in a cavernous space with natural reverb. It is meditative and powerful.
The tracks Mad Max and Play Play blend together surprisingly harmoniously in the album, both more energetic and colored by percussion. The first one, for example, stands out with its irregular machine-like rhythms, and, as the title suggests, it references sense of dystopian punk. This is where it gets more interesting. I assume some memories of energy of New York, where you lived for a while, played a role here.
These two pieces do indeed share a mood and a style. Mad Max is exactly as you described, a dystopian punk big band composition. It has a 7/4 beat, which has a cross rhythm built in. I started with the bass line and improvised the main melody. I layered horns on it until I was satisfied with the dissonance, and then improvised over the texture on my alto saxophone to create additional sections. The lines that I played on the alto set up a 4/4 cross rhythm that really disturbs the feeling of the original beat. I then harmonized it and had several instrumentalists fill out the orchestration. Voices are trumpet, alto saxophone, clarinets, flute, and trombone, along with drums and some synthesizers. I doubled parts and created a really unique, almost synthetic texture. The harmony is dissonant, but it also includes some open fourths and fifths, giving it a futuristic quality. I love the way this song drifts in and out of the recognizable bass line. The rhythmic device is a bit technical, but the 7/4 gives the disjointed feeling of odd beats, and the layering of the 4/4 ensemble solely makes the song groove in a way that almost feels natural. The combination of these elements with the bass clarinet line gives this composition an otherworldly feeling. I honestly haven't heard many other pieces that I can compare with it. It's a strange and futuristic composition that feels aggressive and dangerous. I imagine driving a motorcycle at high speed through a dark night wearing night vision. Movies like Akira, Mad Max, and other thrillers played a role in my inspiration. Terminator 2, maybe. If I ever went to war in space or on an industrial planet, I think this is what it would sound like. Play Play, although similarly dystopian, has a much different purpose. As you might be able to tell, I'm a fan of science fiction. I love Dune, Ray Bradbury, and yes, Star Wars. I think of this composition as the Ewok after party that was too rude and rowdy to show in the film, where everyone got drunk and wild. It's like a deep jungle party with a side of robots and maybe some wartime elements. This kind of event where you feel that you'd better have fun now because tomorrow isn't guaranteed. You realize that everything has changed and that now is the time to enjoy what is left. It sounds dark, but one of the most fascinating things to me about human nature is that even at the worst times, there's always a desire to enjoy something about life. The band goes down with the ship on that one.
Yeah, soundtrack to the idea that we should all have fun since we don't know what might happen tomorrow could be fitting for many things happening in the world right now, and also in the world of cinema. You choose an interesting way to close this album. Whereas Annie was inspired by the TV series Twin Peaks. a series where an innocent and naturally beautiful place becomes the object of evil. It is precisely because of its purity and fragile unattainability that it became so alluring. What role does David Lynch's work play in your art life?
It's true that this title was inspired by the last line of David Lynch's Twin Peaks show. I watched it around the same time that I was composing this, and I wanted to write something that was fun and that had a horror element. I do love David Lynch. I think that his movies are usually very funny, even though they're equally terrifying. One thing I like is that the humor paired with mystery and suspense makes something even more unnerving out of it. Like the killer clown that looks a little ridiculous, but there's something just wrong about it. You want to laugh, but at the same time you don't. I used to play a video game, I think it was called Monster Hockey or something. It was hilarious. I remember you would be playing a hockey game and you could hit players and their limbs would fly off, or they would eat each other. It was all just a joke. I never bothered to look the game up, but this song has some of that inspiration. It's like a B or C horror movie. There's too much blood, and it's not really believable. The manic laughter and screams. The horn section is playing a very strange solo that's part football and part surf rock. I just wanted to make something that would make me laugh and to really blow the album apart. I still laugh when I hear this song. It's really something crazy. I wanted to lighten the mood for those that get through the entire album. People that hear this after all the other compositions might be left thinking, who is this guy? Not that I don't want to be figured out, it's just fun to show people a lot of sides of the same personality. I think that most people can relate to the variety in this album. Hopefully there's something for everyone. I put this one at the end for a reason. It might not be a fan favorite.
Yeah, a music album as unusual and diverse as a patchwork quilt or fresco couldn't have had any other cover in my opinion. But in this case, the cover and what would be depicted on it played a truly important personal role. After all, the album contains so much raw, intimate experience. And the cover is exactly what a person sees and imagines in their mind even before they start listening to the music. Tell us how the album design came to life and what feelings you had when you approved it. What was on your mind when you said, yeah, this is it?
Well, this is a fun one and very meaningful to me. My friend from Houston, Josh Pazda, did the artwork. He's a really generous and creative friend. We've known each other for something like 20 years. He sent me something like 30 art pieces, and when I saw this, I immediately decided it was the one. He made this piece by a process called transfer. He would take a canvas and layer it with gesso, then place media on it, magazines, photos, anything with ink. When the gesso dried, he would peel the media off the canvas, destroying the original and leaving a reverse imprint of the ink left on the canvas. This form of destructive collage is completely in line with my concept for this album as a whole. I didn't even know that's what he was doing when I originally saw the art pieces. I took my influences and life experiences, put them down in music, and then destroyed them and put them back together like a model without instructions. I love this artwork, and out of all the different ideas I tried, it stands the test of time for me. The darkness, beauty, and ethereal nature of the colors, and the torn borders between the different pieces of media all speak to me. I am very grateful that he agreed to give me this artwork, and I couldn't imagine a better fit for the record.
It's always a great honor to peek behind the scenes of how professional musicians create music. especially when it's underground music from such finely tuned composers in 2025. Thank you for creating masterpieces that take you far beyond this crazy world, even if just for the duration of the album. And lastly, if your album Echo Deep were a phrase, what message would it carry for listeners?
Well, to really boil it down into just one phrase, I guess it would be, if you have an idea, you just got to follow it through. It took me a long time to finish this and get all the ideas down, and I built it up and I tore it down and built it up and tore it down again. But I'm really happy with what happened, and I thank everybody that helped me to make it. I would just say keep going, and if you have something that you want to express, just keep going and figure it out.
Amazing! We had such a picturesque and deep conversation. This was the Sonic Prism podcast. We've been discussing the creation of the album Echo Deep and the inspiration behind it with the wonderful saxophonist, composer, and jazz musician Joe Santamaria. Thank you so much for sharing this story with us. It's been both fascinating and inspiring. This has been Mira Gordy, and just a reminder that we will leave all the useful links, including one to download Echo Deep, in the description of this podcast. See you in future episodes.